Hi everyone, back tuning into today's video. We're going to have a look at weather for next week. Today, I think we're going to see some perhaps increasingly cool and sort of wintry conditions coming along later next week, particularly for northern parts of the country. Not sure going to be much in the south. I think for the north, we could see some possibly increasingly wintry conditions turning up next week. It will be getting a little bit cold, I think, as we move through next week. Now, before I get on with that, just want to mention the advertising this video ads on my pages at GazWebBiz.com. If you hit play on the video ad, you'll be supporting GazWebBiz.com. Thanks very much for doing that. It pays for websites essentially, so if you get involved and hit play on the ad, you don't necessarily have to sit through, watch the whole thing from beginning to end. Just hit play on the ad, and you'll be helping to support GazWebBiz.com. Thanks so much for doing that. Just want to start off with the Central England temperature for January from Hadley. This has been well above average through the month. It's been a very mild month so far. It's still very mild, actually, still well above average. We have dipped below 6 Celsius now, provisionally, up to the 22nd of January. We're now down to 5.9. That's still very mild, though, an anomaly of 2.3 above the Central England temperature average. As I say, this is an anomaly, a provisional anomaly up to the 22nd, so it isn't the final number by any means. We've got another week to go, and there'll probably be some adjustments on that as well. And I think generally the next week we'll see that Central England temperature edging down a little bit. But nevertheless, I think we're still going to be at least a degree and a half above average by the end of the month. So it is going to turn out to be a very mild January, I think. Whatever happens. Obviously, if we had a really big freeze or something like that in the final week, that would be enough to bring us down closer to average, but we're not going to get that. It's just going to be generally turning a little bit cooler. It won't be enough to offset that big anomaly. So have a look at the GFS temperature ensembles. Remember, the red line here is where we should be at this time of the year. We're going to go above average tomorrow, bringing a big area of low pressure with a large warm sector through. That's going to have a lot of rain with it. But it is going to lift the temperatures up briefly. But generally, I think you can see that the temperature trend is going to be below average for the rest of January. The 1st of February is just there, and I think generally the trend there is for temperatures to be dipping away below the red line. So we will be going quite chilly through the rest of the month, and actually it could stay quite chilly into the first days of February. But as we get to the very end of the ensemble chart here, long way out of course, so huge caveats apply, but as we get towards the end, we do start seeing many of the temperature ensembles beginning to pick up again. So maybe towards the end of the first week of February it might turn generally milder, with more of a westerly flow re-establishing, but we'll worry about that when we get to it. Let's concentrate on the rest of January. I think we are looking at quite a chilly sort of end to January. Not severely cold by any means. It's not going to be a big freeze, but just generally rather on the cool side. The rainfall spikes show that we have got more rain coming up, more precipitation, I'm afraid. Quite a lot associated with tomorrow's area of low pressure. Then we're going to bring a trough or something through on Saturday with a rainfall spike there. Another big spike on Sunday, so really unsettled spell coming up, and that goes on into next week as well with those rainfall spikes. Of course, as these temperatures are dipping away next week, there will, with precipitation being around, be the potential for some wintry conditions, perhaps, particularly in the north. That's the ensemble for London. Just have a very quick look at the ensemble for Aberdeen, and that's even colder. So I think the cold and wintry potential will be more for the north, less so for the south. We're going below the -5 line there for quite a few days up across northern Scotland. So I think Scotland will be probably the action for the wintry conditions, maybe coming down into northern England, less so further south. The temperature anomalies for Europe for the next week, the 23rd of January to the 30th, shows that most of Europe is going to be below average, actually. And the coldest anomalies, strangely, where we have the warmest anomalies earlier in the winter. So it's Scandinavia, it's eastern and northeastern Europe, and it's western Russia. There we've got anomalies going down something close to 8 to 10 degrees for parts of western Russia below average. Out in the west, actually it's not that cold. We are just about below average for Ireland, Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, but only with anomalies from 0 to 2 degrees below average. The cold is basically, or the severest of the cold anyway, is basically in the east and the northeast. And the reason for that is that that's where we've got this big blocking area of high pressure from Scandinavia stretching out into Russia. Now, this is the GFS chart for Monday. Got the low pressure up to the northeast, blocking the flow, as it has been on and off throughout much of January. Deep area of low pressure to western Scotland. There'll be an unsettled start to next week with showers or longer spells of rain in many parts of the country. Quite a cold northwesterly flow coming down around that area of low pressure as well. Now, as we run through to the middle of next week, what happens is that low pressure starts to dive southwards, and this has been signalled by models quite a lot over the last few days for this to happen. Been toying with the idea. It is beginning to come into a sort of semi-reliable time frame now, so we haven't got to take it seriously, but that low pressure moves down across the country, and eventually, as we get through to Thursday, the 30th of January, it's slipping away into France. Now, that's important because it's bringing down much cooler air with it on its northern flank. So as that low pressure moves across the country, there will be a growing potential through the middle of next week for some wintry conditions up in the north. Then we've got these areas of low pressure still trying to come in from the Atlantic, so we never really set in to an easterly flow, and these areas of low pressure start to push through towards the end of next week. Now, these areas of low pressure come into quite cold air, so they'll probably bring rain to the south, but for the north we've got to be looking out for some snow, I think, as those areas of low pressure come in. And then going out to the weekend, the first weekend of February, we've got another area of low pressure coming in off the Atlantic, quite a deep one, and that's coming into cold air. So on the northern and eastern side of that, we've got to be looking out for snow, and again, it's mainly for Scotland here and northern parts of England. And we end up at day 10, the 2nd of February, still in that chilly to cold northwesterly flow there across the country. Quite interesting, but I think for the north in particular, we've got to be looking out for some wintry conditions. The East MWF for Monday shows that low pressure to the northwest of Scotland, bringing in this cool west to northwesterly flow. Does it move southwards with below? Yes, it does. Bends below coming south in the middle of next week, so by Wednesday it's sitting to the south of the country across the Channel. As I say, it's pulling down colder northeasterly, northerly air on the northern side of that low pressure, so showers would be turning wintry. And as we go through to Thursday the 30th, we're bringing in a not desperately cold east to northeasterly flow, but it is certainly a lot cooler than we've been used to, and that could bring some wintry showers, perhaps even down into the southeast country. The Scandinavian high is trying to get in and pull winds in from the east, but I think really it's the Atlantic we're looking at, because we go through to Friday and then on into Saturday. The next area of low pressure comes in, very deep area of low pressure, that one. Again, that's coming into cold air, so probably rain for England and Wales, but snow perhaps for Scotland and Northern Ireland, possibly down into northern England as well. It's a long way off though, so the detail will change, but the idea really is from the middle of next week through to the end of next week, increasingly cool with a risk of wintry conditions in the north. We end up on day 10, Sunday the 2nd of February, with low pressure to the north of Scotland, bringing in this cool to cold west northwesterly flow. Another area of low pressure there in the mid-Atlantic, that will be coming in. Again, that's coming into cold air, so for the northern part of the country, again, we would be having to think about at least some wintry conditions. So I think that's what we're going to be looking at through next week. I think we will see that low pressure starting to sink southwards and move across the country through the early part of next week, eventually moving away from the middle of next week to the south. That will pull winds around to the north or the northeast, possibly the east, very briefly. It'll have colder air with it, and then as those areas of low pressure come back in from the Atlantic at the end of next week and into the first weekend of February, they'll be coming into that cold air. So on the northern flank of those areas of low pressure, that's where we've got to be thinking about wintry conditions. And I think it's mainly going to be for the north of the country, but it could change, and the detail on this will change over the next few days. But the idea is increasingly cool through next week, and possibly turning wintry, particularly, but perhaps not exclusively, for the north. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.